The English department in my high school did a neat thing for us during our freshman year. I guess they did it for our senior year. But they had us write a letter to ourselves that would be delivered in the last week before we graduated as seniors. So I took the challenge pretty seriously because I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of my senior self. I didn't want him to think I was just just some freshman that didn't know anything about life or the world. So I tried to give really big news updates that I thought were pertinent, that my senior self would remember. So the first thing I mentioned was we had a new girlfriend, and I approached that, I think, with the correct amount of caution, looking into the future as far as the length that high school relationships last. I was really, really into being a junior firefighter. I was really spent most of my time at the firehouse and the rest of it at baseball practice. And so I mentioned baseball. And the last thing I said to myself was, you better have our truck. So a pickup truck that I was coveting at the local Dodge dealership, I think. So reading it on the eve of my graduation, I was just struck by how much of a disappointment I would have been to my freshman self. Admittedly, he had called the realistic possibility of the relationship not going the distance. I was still involved with the fire department, but not nearly as much because there was so much else going on in my life. I had given up baseball entirely, and most grievously of all, I chose not to purchase a truck. And that as much as anything, this letter showed me the shifting of my priorities and areas in which I grew as a person over that 4-year span. I wanted the truck, most of all, to fit in at the fire department, where they all had big trucks. I got a sedan, a full-size sedan, instead, so that I could carry around my friends and youth group kids, which I did a lot. And to that end, that whole faith thing became a huge part of my life, and a huge influence on my relationships and where I found my worth and where I found my vitality in my life. It helped form the direction in which I was going to college and that I knew now. I knew what had brought me joy and contentment had changed over the 4 years of high school, but this letter was the first time that I was face to face with my former self in a sort of dialogue or a conversation about it. Sure, I might have been disappointing a little bit to him, but I was thrilled with where I was and where I was going. And I often wonder over the years if I just poofed into different stages of my life, what I would think. Or if my past self poofed into this moment right now, what I would think. Would I be content with what I saw? What would even be a mark of success or expectation? Have you ever had an experience being face to face with your past self? What do you think your past self would think of you today? How have you changed? What kind of character development have you gone through in the story of your life? Well, in Scripture, we learn that though God is steadfast through the ages, character development and growth are essential parts of the human story and the life of discipleship. The conversation that we highlight today in our focus verse is between Peter and Jesus. And it is a moment that characterizes and signals the growth of Simon Peter as a disciple. We should note that Peter's stomach must have been tied in knots, as this was the first recorded time in the Gospel of John that he and Jesus sat down together after Peter's thrice denial of Jesus. One might have been expecting this to be another "get thee behind me, Satan" moment. Peter had been adamant during Jesus' farewell speech about his exceeding faithfulness and flat-out rejection of the idea that the Son of God must die in order to fulfill God's plan for salvation, only to be put firmly in his place by Jesus and then to spectacularly fail at living up to his promises when questioned after Jesus' arrest. And it's just one instance of many where Peter runs headlong into the wrong response for the situation. Peter may have deserved, who knows, another tongue lashing. But what we are made privy to is a conversation held in a very different tone. Jesus very intentionally mirrors much about their previous encounters, but does so in a way as to invite Peter into the future of this ministry that he's leaving with these disciples, the ministry of the church, as he is always expected to be a big part of. That's why he has this name Peter, Petra, rock, the foundation, the rock upon which I'll build my church. Jesus' three questions, do you love me, serve a multifaceted purpose. Surely it is a direct allusion to Peter's three denials, a sense of an opportunity to redeem those moments. But it is also a callback to Peter's big words during Jesus' farewell, where he says, I love you more than these other disciples do. And in Greek, the third repetition of a phrase or a question is a linguistic sign of emphasis. When you say something three times, you really, really mean it. So 3 times signals that, and that adds much unspoken poignancy to Peter's denial in the first place. He denies him 3 times. Jesus' questions here, and Peter's response, yes, I do love you, 3 times. When Peter answers Jesus in the affirmative each time, Jesus gives a command that basically says, show me, live it out. Feed my sheep, care for my sheep, feed my lambs. Jesus is pointing to love as a verb. Basically, again, saying, show me this love. Don't just declare it. And this must be the way his followers see his love. As St. Augustine would later say, love is a pretty word, but an even prettier deed. And as Peter takes the reins of ministry in stories told in other parts in the New Testament, we see the continued transformation from one who used to just talk a big talk into a servant leader, who, as Paul would remind us, is certainly not perfect in all belief and thought, but who has grown to embody the declarations that he has made as a younger person, as a younger disciple. Even Peter, who failed so hard, could be redeemed and reinstated by the risen Jesus, the risen Christ. This is grace in action, and this is the love that lays itself down for others, which at the end of Jesus' conversation with Peter, Jesus points out will happen in Peter's life as well. It's pretty much a nexus moment in Peter's discipleship and lived out life, where he starts to move into big words spoken, into big actions lived. It's character development. It's growth. And growth is a big part of a lot of churches and our missions. Growth in church terms, it's a pretty standard line in a mission statement to throw the word grow in there somewhere. We want to grow in our faith and in our relationship with God and our relationships with each other. But I think sometimes there's an inherent tension that can develop with the way that a lot of our faith and belief are classically instructed. So much of Christianity has been historically about the right, quotes, right articulation of belief and doctrine. And in catechesis, we encourage young disciples to grow in their articulation of that set of beliefs. Ask any of the confirmands about the Wesleyan quadrilateral or the 3 phases of Wesleyan grace, and they will repeat to you the answer. Once you do that, once you learn these things and you're right, there's oftentimes not really anywhere else to go from there. And the experiences of your life must either be translated in defense of or in confirmation of your belief set. And hearkening back to our reflection last week, sometimes the theological task of a church can be so focused on getting people to the point of being saved that the path for future growth isn't always clear, or in some cases, even seen as necessary. We graduated from Sunday school. We never have to go back. We made our confirmation. The journey is complete. Any of these types of things that maybe we don't say out loud, but do sometimes tend to happen. The way that Methodists understand grace, though, has an important distinction that leads us into a dynamic journey of sanctification, we call it. We believe that once we have accepted the love of God, that each day is a step along the way to being in the full embrace of God's divine presence and love. But rather than trying to hearken back to a moment or a place when things were all in the right, our journey is leading us forward into new and emerging experiences of God. And those experiences serve to transform us and enable us to grow. As Peter shows us, the journey of growth into who God has created us to be and calls us to be involves all kinds of moments, kinds of challenges and mistakes and risks and doubts and sometimes spectacular failures. It is not this linear journey. And so we have this experience where we encounter all of these moments in life, some that are good, some that are challenging, some that feel like victory, some that feel like defeat. And we are safe in the arms of God on this journey of sanctifying grace. Maybe we thought we knew about our life and our priorities, and what we thought about those things has grown or changed over the last 4 years or over our lifetime. Maybe growing and exploring our faith has given us a new view of life and a new view of the world through Jesus' eyes, and a living and a contentment that we never imagined otherwise. We want to be building a Miss Frizzle in the Magic School Bus model of faith. One that says, let's take this out of the classroom, let's get on the bus, let's get out of the bus, get messy, make mistakes, and learn and grow. But the way that we watch that show is that we have confidence that they are with one who is creating a safe space for them to make those mistakes. I don't know about you, but I'm not usually anxious when I watch the Magic School Bus. The same is true in our faith. We are encouraged to get out of the classroom, to get out into the world, to get messy. That's the whole idea of Jesus coming into the world with us, into the mess that Jesus then redeems and gives us a way to do as well. Jesus, in his continued calling of Peter, reminds us that grace abounds for us too, and that our worth as God's children is not determined by our success rate, whatever that means. Grace frees us to explore, to question, to wrestle, and even step out in faith and fail at times, whatever that means. May we, as an expression of this faith, be an arena where we can be dynamic characters in a living faith experience, not static ones. May we continue to create a planting bed where seeds of faith can set down deep roots and be fortified in their depth by making it through the storms of life. May we be ever growing and working out this understanding that at the core of who we are God's beloved children. And that frees us to embrace the world with the